I do want to say that the focused programming here at the Delaplane is it's made possible by some funding that we get from PNC Bank. And Stacy, right? Yeah. I knew we'd met before, and I wanted to make sure you were in the room. I want to invite Stacy Collins from PNC Bank to say just a few words before we turn things over to our jurors. So, Stacy, if you want to come up.
Thank you so much. And I stand between you and Saskia, which I'm looking forward to hearing from her as well. I just want a huge shout out to the team at the Delaplane. This program is so unique, and as somebody who started out thinking they were going to be a photographer at 9 years old, it didn't go that way, but I met some pretty cool people along the way. I love that they recognize photography as an art and the artistry that goes into it. And I think that is so important to showcase the art that makes up the world of photography. So personally, I love getting to see this exhibit every 2 years when it comes around. From the PNC side, I bring my greetings and hello. And one of the main reasons you see PNC invest in the arts is because there is such a strong connection between a vibrant art community and a vibrant community. And so when you invest in the arts, you're investing in the economic viability of a community. In Frederick, we are so fortunate to have such a strong, vibrant, and collaborative art community, and this is just one of the ways that shows up for everybody to enjoy. So with that, I will say thank you. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to getting to see the rest of the exhibit and getting to hear from our featured speaker today.
Thanks, Okay. I love when our National Juried Photography Exhibition comes around. We do a National Juried Exhibition as well that's open to all media, and that happens in the spring. It happens in May and June, so we'll have a call for art coming up pretty soon for that. But one of the things that's super interesting to me about the National Juried Photography Exhibition is that it's a constraint on medium, and so it shows you the possibilities of what a medium can do, and also all the different ways that artists are thinking about one sort of medium. You know what I mean? And it ends up being really exciting. I think there's cyanotype work, there's more documentary work, there's just a huge wide variety of kinds of photography in the exhibition, and it's represented too in our solo exhibitions. So it's always really exciting when this comes around, and it's been great working with Saskia Kahn, our juror this year. She was fastidious and quick and made really great decisions, I think. And so it's been great working with Saskia. I'm going to read a bio, and then I'm going to get out of the way. Saskia's going to come up and chat with us. So Saskia Kahn is a photographer and faculty member at the Maryland Institute College of Art. She specializes in portraiture. Her work in this genre extends into community building through collaborative photography projects. Kahn draws from her heritage and interest in diasporic memory. She was the winner of the Best Photography Thesis for the 2022 Global Design Graduate Show. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, the Brooklyn Rail, and Entertainment Weekly, among others. Kahn is also a contributing photo essayist for Be More Art magazine in Baltimore. Would you all welcome up Saskia Kahn?
Thanks for coming out today and for the warm welcome. This seems so formal, but I'm going to just talk about what I do, which thank you so much, Corey Fry, for inviting me to jury this exhibition. It was really hard making the decisions. The show looks amazing. I am just blown away by how everything looks. So congrats to all of you who are in the show. I had a very small part in your special day, so I hope you have a great reception later as well. So what I put together was a talk about like why I photograph people and how I photograph people. And I'm gonna kind of give you a survey of how I've done that throughout my life by like looking at basically 3 different ways, like 2 projects and then what I do for Be More Art magazine and how portraiture like plays a part in my projects and also like my assignment work. So hopefully, even if you're a landscape person or you like to photograph objects, you'll get something out of it, but it is a people-heavy talk. So when I rediscovered a contact sheet, and also if I say like a photo, I know there's so many photo people in the room, but if I say a term you don't know, you can just be like, what is that? So a contact sheet, back in the days of film, you would take your negatives because it was so time, consuming to like print one single image, and you would put all the negatives on a photographic piece of paper and expose just those small frames. And on one roll of film, you just had 24 to 36 images. So that feeling of like that roll of film was kind of like an insight into what you were doing with your life at that time, right? Like the first 5 frames is when you were with this person, and the next 5 frames was on maybe a different day. And I saw one contact sheet, like one little slice of life that I had made when I was a freshman in high school, so I'm like 14 years old. And there were all these people that I had photographed on the street in a neighborhood. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, neighborhood called Park Slope. And when I saw this, 15 years later or so, I was like, wow, I've been curious about strangers and photographing strangers for a long time, way before I had an education in fine art photography and before I kind of, started questioning, what is the meaning of making pictures? Why am I making pictures? Is this important? This is what I love to do. And I think that was important for me to see again and to just kind of like remember that joy, or the thing that I gravitate to naturally, is a valuable thing to like cherish and remember, as I also like try to expand or make those projects a little bit more, profound or deeper. So this is another early image of mine. So this is like from a 35 millimeter roll of film, like a smaller, but this was kind of moving into medium format photography. And this will give you a sense of like the characters of the neighborhood where I grew up in Brooklyn. So Brooklyn is a really big place. Every neighborhood has its own thing going on. Where I grew up there was a big influx of people from like post-Soviet countries, Georgia, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, so forth. And there were these babushkas, these grandmothers, who were really fun to look at. And I wanted to photograph them. And I made this image. And this image was kind of the entry point for me to continue to want to photograph like these characters of where I grew up. And this led to what became like a monthly series where each month I would work for the Brooklyn Rail, and I'd put together kind of a pocket of life, like insight into what makes this neighborhood quirky or specific or interesting. And the reason why that was important for me to do is that this is kind of the landscape of the Brooklyn that I'm from. And you wouldn't necessarily think that when you think of like New York City and skyscrapers, but it was also very overshadowed by this huge gentrification spike that was happening at this time. So basically what would happen is like the New York Times would have an article that would be like, Brooklyn's the hot new place, or kind of like go to Brooklyn, Brooklyn. But they were not talking about like the areas that I was from. And so I felt this like encroaching sense of change, like impending change was going to happen. And that was another reason why I was like, I have to photograph it, not just because it's familiar to me, but because I have to do it now before things change. So that's kind of like important to me. So this image, I'm trying to like strategizing, how am I going to do this technically? Like, also maybe with my person, like how am I going to approach people? And this is taken with a longer lens. So focal length was a big consideration for me, because the longer the focal length, the farther away I could be from this character or this photo moment. But that meant I would never really interact with the person. And part of that means that I'm not getting their consent, and I'm kind of trying to like figure out what does that mean to not ask. And not only, did it have an ethical question for me, but it also is going to change how my images look. So at this point, I'm like, I'm going to change, and I'm not going to work with my long lenses. I'm going to work with my wider lenses, and I'm going to speak with the people that I photograph. So how am I going to do that? So this is an image I took like around this time when I'm thinking about street portraits and like how do you do this? And I just like took this picture of a photographer that I saw on the boardwalk, which is like a strip of like a promenade between that connects several different beaches, areas in Brooklyn, Coney Island, you may have heard of it. And I saw this photographer and his confidence, and I was like, there's something about him that fits in with the culture, with what he's wearing, with his stance. He's got, you can't really see it in the back, but like he's wearing something that says New York like on his hat, and his cameras are out. Like he's ready to go, like ready to make pictures. And this made me think about appearance and how I act and what I say and what I do, and how that may persuade somebody or kind of make them feel less like, maybe like I'm one of the gentrifiers, I'm one of the people coming from, to take their neighborhood. And what could I do to like disarm people a little bit? So has anyone here heard about like what code switching is, that term? So it's like maybe you're speaking a little bit differently or dressing a little bit differently. Like, I'm thinking about like, I'm gonna put on jewelry today because I'm the person giving the artist talk. Like, I don't know, so I'm kind of thinking about that, where we all do it all the time. And so my strategy in these street portraits was to do code switching, basically. That I would dress and I would speak in a certain way to try to create connection in the subtext of our meeting with the stranger, without having to say that, like the way that I looked, the way that I spoke. And that's really important because a lot of these people don't speak English, and I only speak English. So that was something that I was thinking a lot about, like how can I look like this person's granddaughter or somebody familiar to them. So that was my strategy, kind of like working for the Brooklyn Rail in these areas that even though I'm from, I still felt like an outsider. I still felt like I looked like I didn't belong. So each one was like, bright in furs, and I would do there was like a photojournalistic component to it as well with writing and that kind of thing. So this was like the tanners that were like year-long tanners. So this was actually photographed in the winter. So then the pandemic happens, right? And I'm wearing a mask. And so to code switch, or to like, basically even just giving a warm smile, like I'm approaching you and I'm like hi. Like I wanna like let somebody know I'm coming toward them with good intentions. I couldn't do that. Because if you come towards somebody during like the lockdown, it's already like, first of all, social distancing, hello, like please. Second of all, I'm wearing a mask. I was even wearing a mask outside at this time because this is like the height of like lockdown. So I had to change my strategy. And this was the first time that I really leaned into the why am I making pictures? And I tried to convey that to the strangers that I was speaking to, like basically not to dumb down my reasoning. You may have heard, maybe a photo teacher once said to you, well, just tell them you're a student. Like just say that, and then they'll be disarmed and they'll let you take a picture. And this was the first time that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to share the reason and basically treat the stranger like as an intelligent person who has studied art themselves, and if they're on board, and that's great. And that's when I started to really think about, why do I make these pictures at the beach? And what I have found is that, like, I, as an artist and somebody who's always felt like an outsider in whatever space that I'm in, like I'm too like local for the city, or I'm too city for the locals, or whatever it might be, the beach was a landscape that forced people to take off whatever masks that they wear in their basically everyday life. And there's a sociologist, and I was very interested in sociology at the time, still am, named Irving Goffman, who writes about this thing that we all do, which is we wear our masks. He thinks about the Shakespeare quote, like, all the world's a stage. And he talks about how everyone is basically a performative version of themselves, and all the things that go into a theatrical production go into our everyday lives, like the costumes, the props, the set, like all of that is constructed. But the beach is a place, because of the heat, the sand, the appropriateness of shedding your clothing, where I got to see people from all walks of life, all ages, basically shed that mask, and I felt like it was this kind of way for the land to inform behavior that I was really interested in. So this is an image that I made on the left, and sometimes I'll always follow up with people I photograph too. So then I would, see this guy's Instagram, right? And the days after I took the portrait, he's entering into military school. And for me, that really underscored the importance of like using the parameters of the beachscape to photograph people, because the Army is arguably one of the places where we have to be the least individualized and the most masked, like really hide your identity. So I thought that contrast like really speaks to what I'm talking about. And so then I thought I would talk a little bit about like the different stories that come up from like photographing these people that you don't get to see in a caption or just by looking at the image alone. So again, it was about knowing the why. Why am I asking people to be in front of the camera? And for me, this picture is all about blue. And I saw the blue bathing suits and the blue do-rag, and the air was blue because it was kind of misty, end of day dusk, the water was blue. And I could say that. And they didn't realize that they were all wearing blue and all matching. And so they were excited. They're like, I get it, I see it too. And so that allows for this kind of collaborative moment to happen, where we're kind of all on the same page and kind of having a shared goal in mind. This is also like, for me, just like a kind of moment of a turning point, because this kind of looks like the popular kids when I was like the weird kid. Even though I was older, when I took the picture, I wasn't in high school anymore. But to actually be able to kind of convey that what I was doing was kind of interesting and not like, that's weird, was like a very successful moment for me, and it kind of gave me a boost of confidence that I needed to continue to like basically ask strangers to participate in my art making. This was a fun kind of realization. So I went to a really pretty bad public high school with like 4,000 students and metal detectors and gangs and that kind of thing. But the only saving grace from that time was the photo department, and that's where I spent all my time in the dark room. It was a really great photo department, and this person happened to be an alum of that photo department too. And so that was a really great thing, because we were like, oh, did you have teacher Mr. Wallach? And I was like, yes. And it's kind of just like a happy thing about photographing in the area that you're actually from, by the way, that's something I was thinking a lot about when I was like looking at the work, was like, is this a picture that only you or only this person could make? Is it specific to place? I think it's important. This is another thing that I'll do. So watch out. Like if you want to photograph strangers, I always say, look and see if there's a girlfriend, boyfriend, or some kind of romantic partner nearby, like in the vicinity, but not, because you never want to approach somebody and then, you know, their romantic partner's like comes running toward you and like, who are you talking to? Like, you know, so you always kind of like try to assess like who are the other family members or people around. But because sometimes I'll just be really interested in one person, but I'll see the couple, and so what I'll do is photograph them together, and they'll get their pictures and everything. But what I was really interested in was this young man's flower in his hair, and so when the time was right, I was able to kind of slowly get closer and make this image, because I was really interested in the kind of masculine feminine meeting between like the buzz cut and the flower. And so again, like this neighborhood is very predominantly Russian speaking, and now there's been a new influx of refugees because of the war in Ukraine. So there's a whole new set of people coming to this area who had to flee because of that war. So all the three young men in the back, just two of whom were from Ukraine and one is from Russia, were just coming to New York like weeks prior to this image, and met this young woman, and she translated for me and she helped me make these images. So this is kind of where I'm going. I'm very interested in kind of seeing how the two generations of immigrants are going to change the demographics of that space. So this is another kind of more recent image that I've made. Also moving into getting more architecture in my work, you might see like a little bit more of a wide angle and more information about the landscape behind the figure now. And this was this young woman's, Katya's, very first day in Brighton Beach, which for me is an honor, because this is like Little Odessa is the nickname for this neighborhood. And so when you flee, I mean, to be a refugee, it just blows my mind, their bravery to like come here as a young person, start their lives over, not know how to speak English. And what I'm very interested in as well, like, is that experience of being a refugee and coming to the water and being healed by like being in a familiar space like a beach, because Odessa is also known for its beaches. And that has to do with my own family history as well. Like, so that's why I oftentimes feel like I have something inside me that really respects the other person and what they're going through, because that's like what my grandparents went through and so on. So there's a lot of mutual, like maybe unspoken respect, but then sometimes we have that conversation as well when we meet. I love that this is also, I love my own picture. That's kind of a weird thing to say, but I really like how this turned out, because it was one of those things when you shoot on film, you really don't know if you're going to get what you saw in that moment as like the magical thing. So the magical thing for me was, again, with the color palette, the green bathing suit with the green houses, and so that's what helped me, again, kind of, you know, ask this woman to participate in the photograph. But she was part of a group. They were having a birthday party with whipped cream and strawberries, and like they were doing their own thing. They definitely did not want to like be approached by anyone. So it took a lot. I really felt like I had to like have conviction and like go up there and, you know, march in the sand and be like, sorry to interrupt, but I really need to make this picture. And you could see like, you know, there's some like food from their party there. And also, end of the day, like losing light, like this, we have to do this. And I'll say this happened to me a lot, because I'll see somebody who looks great, like great outfit, would make a wonderful photograph, and sometimes I just don't feel like it's necessary for me to bother them. Like, I really feel like if I have to make the picture, I will do it. But there's also, like, I do a whole set of questioning myself, like, do I need to really do this? I don't know if you know the phrase, check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's what I'm always telling myself. Like, don't do it unless you really have to, like, because there are certain moments that are more, I guess, like, precarious than others, because I am alone, by the way, at this time with an expensive camera on me in New York City. And so this was the kind of like nice thing about being able to exhibit pieces, is that sometimes the people who are in your photos get to see themselves in a site-specific place. So this is the photographs hanging in public at the beach. And this was for anniversary of Hurricane Sandy, which really impacted that landscape. And so what was I going to do? I came to MICA in Baltimore, the Maryland Institute College of Art for graduate school, and I was really into my beach pictures, but there's no beach here. So I wanted to get that same experience of where are people unmasking, and my sister-in-law suggested a certain skate park, and that's where I kind of made my thesis project, Skate Park Baltimore, and the concrete became the beach for me. It was really, and it actually is a lot like seeing people flow the way that water flows when you see a really packed skate park and everyone with the roller skates and the skateboards, and it's really a beautiful, very small ecosystem. And the same effect of the sun and the sweat and being yourself happens to exist in this space. And so I was really interested, again, in kind of the emotional language of shedding the mask. And so most of the work has nothing to do with skateboarding as a sport at all, but really about these young people who then through speaking with them and talking with them, understood that they were working really hard to make this space inclusive and safe for them. So that's what evolved my thinking to move away from open space and nature is like, it's the landscape that makes people comfortable. And I really started to understand that it is not the landscape or a park in itself that makes for these, utopias, so to speak, but it's really the people who use them. And Jane Jacobs writes, she's an urban sociologist, activist who wrote about parks are only as good as the people who use them. Because if you think of a deserted, forest or park or whatever, it can be very unsafe. So it's really about how people show up in this space. And so that's when the project changed for me and became about really starting to understand what community building is and how young people form community so that this park can be enjoyed, and how important it is during an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. At this time, I'm also thinking a lot about the words that I use. So I'm not going to do a whole topic about history about how photography was used as a colonizing tool, but if you just hear it in the words to shoot someone, that's your subject, you're capturing them, so, that's very common terminology in photography. So I was trying to also think about saying, to photograph, to make a picture together instead of to take a picture together, to, call the people I was photographing models and not subjects, so, that kind of thing. And that was a big part of my process of photographing people at this time too. Another strategy that I used, if you're curious, how do you form relationships with somebody? This is what I learned. I've not done it long-term relationships for that long, but it's very, very different than photographing strangers as one-off things. So what I did is I used a more point-and-shoot style digital camera on my first meetings. So photograph somebody, they look interesting, I would love for them to be in the project. We're gonna have a very simple exchange. It's gonna be short, digital camera, they get the pictures. Then they receive the images, and now we have an opportunity for correspondence, and then we'll come together with the medium format camera, which is a much bigger camera, and we're gonna have like more of a photo session together. And those two experience, it's like, when you're getting to know any person, you really need to build that trust through meeting them multiple times. So this is another example with the digital camera. I meet Jalen, great person who becomes a large part of this project on the first go, and then we get together again and we make these images with the film camera. And so like being willing to, not be precious about the photographs that you're making, but like also thinking about photography as relationship building, and some pictures never get seen in a gallery. That I think being open to that is a good thing. And so then this is the third meeting at different time. So you can kind of also see somebody grow up, which is nice as well. And then another opportunity that was really great was to show the portraits as a like a commercial video exterior, like LCD thing, where this gallery that exists like in Baltimore City was able to put the photographs on their storefront. And so that was nice, and they could go and see their pictures nice and big. And this was, the community that they were building was really about being an inclusive space specifically for trans and queer skaters as well. So getting that celebration is really important, and recognition. But not being from Baltimore or Maryland, I did have a lot of blind spots in my understanding of different neighborhoods, or how, what their experiences are, what high school they go, whatever it might be. So there's a thing in sociology, a methodology called photo voice, which has the word photo in it. So I was like, I'm interested in that, where you are using photography or images to kind of generate conversation. And you could do this with, anyone like veterans, or you could talk about their experience, look at how hand them cameras and talk about what their experience is. Look at accessibility issues, giving people cameras. So what I did was I gave people cameras, and these were just from eBay, point and shoot 35 millimeter Pentax cameras. And when we would get the film back and get little Walgreens style prints together, and get together in the park, look at the images, and it's the stories that came out of those images. Like that roll of film, right? They took it with their lives on the ground, so to speak, and then I could really understand, seeing the world through their eyes, like through the skater's eyes. And so that's like the kind of supplement to the portraits that I made. And then lastly, I would talk a little bit about working in portraiture in a more short form way. So I just brought in one example of an assignment on dance sport, which is like ballroom dancing, that I did for Be More Art magazine. And so I do the thing that kind of is expected of a photographer to do at a dance competition, which is to photograph the dancing. So I make sure I do that. So I'm coming with digital cameras and lenses to do that. And, I was kind of interested in doing a more underexposed, kind of dramatic way of handling the dancing on the floor. But then I would also set up like a makeshift little studio. This happened to take place in a hotel, so I'm just in a hotel lobby with some continuous lights and the medium form, the Mamiya, photographing the dancers making portraits. And what's nice about this is the opportunity again for conversation, to get names, to get stories, to provide captions for my editor and so on. And then I could, of course, now follow up with these people. So it's not everybody will have that opportunity if you're on an assignment, but I do think if you can add that little extra thing, like if you're already going out there, you're already packing up your gear, you may as well get something out of it that really maybe it fills your cup up. And this is, for me, portraits is what does that. Yes, so you could start if you have any. Oh yeah, and this, I just wanted to say, like, this is another moment where having time is really great, because there's a slowing down process, you know, just with the film and the lights and the intimacy of that moment, where then you can kind of ask for like a wardrobe change or just something more intimate to happen as well. I was thinking a lot about like music on the way here. You know how if anybody reads music, if you see a whole note, right, you're like, you know, you have to sustain that note until that beat of time, that measure is up. And I think another thing that I try to encourage myself to do is to take the full note, like to ride out the moment, and even when it feels a little bit uncomfortable, to really push myself to get the image that I want. And it feels like too long in the moment, but I just think also like take more time than you think you need to really finish the composition, pun intended. Yeah, so that's what I brought for all of you in terms of my work. I wanted to just say that it was like very, very difficult to jury the show. And if you have questions about like my the approach that I took with the selections, like I'm happy to do that, or any other questions. I think we have maybe a few minutes for that. Yeah. Thanks.
Nobody else last, but how do you approach judging the competition like that?
Yeah, it was very difficult. I think one of the things that I was really looking for was how could this image only be made by this specific person, was one thing that I was asking myself. I kept in mind that it was a photography show, so sometimes what came into question looking at this, the images that were submitted was, you know, was this photo illustration, or was maybe there was some digital illustration that was happening, or collage that may have been happening that, you know, if I had to choose between things, I may like, you know, put a photograph above that. I was, well, technically, I mean, that was a big thing, like exposure, light, composition, use of a foreground when it comes to landscape. Like that was something that I was really interested in. Does it generate curiosity from me? Like, how did they make this picture? Why did they make this picture? Also, I will say this one thing, which is kind of granular. Sometimes the image quality, I sometimes maybe question whether or not it could translate as a print at the size. Like if somebody said this is going to be a 40-inch print, and I'm like, I'm not sure it is. You know, I really I was thinking this is going to be an exhibition. You know, so that was another thing that I was really wanting to make sure that everyone felt successful about the final culmination, which I think it really looks good. Oh, yeah.
When you photograph people, when I'm photographing people, when I go back and look at the stuff, I always see things I did not see in the viewfinder. And I looked at the photograph of the woman at Brighton Beach, and I noticed the shadow of the seagull
Yeah.
behind her, which I thought was one of those gotcha moments where you didn't expect it again, but it fills up the space and it makes it more of an image than just a photograph.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely, when I'm selecting, because I don't take that many images when I shoot medium format, so that helps a lot. It's very lucky. But also just trying to I would say composition is probably the one thing that I'm always striving to push myself for. Looking at the edges of the frame and being like, is there anything in the top left corner? You know, like I am trying to also remember to do that as well as like make the person feel comfortable. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
So in terms of approaching people,
Yeah, go ahead.
and in terms of approaching people, like I personally, notoriously, like better inanimate and landscape. In part because I kind of like and thank you for calling them the participants or whatever, not
Yeah.
the subject. And what I do think indeed that it's kind of like their image, as far as they express it, belongs to them exclusively. And so one of the things I'm thinking, and that's also why, in part it's because of the lack of control on not lacking the photographer, because I think that, if you take a picture of me, not you particularly, but that's why if you person take a picture of me, I think I can do it better. So it kind of like, in part is that, but in part is also because once it's taken, that image is there forever, and I'm not the same person that image was. So I was wondering how you approach that, particularly with the fact that it's unlike video or film, really like image are really forever. And so, what do you think of?
Like about the person changing over time, about the image being
the person
static?
changing with time, or giving you consent at some point, and then image existing regardless of the fact that they, if I am a subject participant, I have to, sometimes sign this disclosure thing or whatever. So how do you think about that?
I know. Well, there are times when, like, there's an image that it's still like itching in my brain because I love this picture so much, but the person after they got it were like, please don't show this anywhere. And it's actually pretty, like, a lot has changed in the selfie era that we are in, because like you're saying, control over how I look, everyone has control, and it can be a little bit kind of like have a bit of a strange feeling to see how somebody else interprets your face if you're already very used to photographing oneself, like yourself. But I agree that time maybe 10 years from now, it won't matter because this person will be an adult and she'll look at the image differently, and it's almost like not her anymore. It really is that moment in time. So sometimes I just have to like wait it out, because for me, I am just like, playing by the rules of my own game, which is consent. So it does have a downside though. Yeah.
I was just wondering, we talked about you don't want to be exploitative of the people you take pictures of, and you don't want to use words like shoot and capture, and you also talk about developing a relationship with some of your subjects, and you'll like meet again for photo shoots and stuff. I was just wondering, do they get compensated at all? Are you compensated? Because you're taking pictures and then trying to sell them for.
Oh yeah, right. That's a really I haven't made a lot of money off of this, so like it hasn't come up yet. But like, but the person Jalen, so everyone who participated in the photo, like the long-term relationships, they are well, first of all, they get all of their materials and stuff for free. So they're getting a free photography workshop, but they also were paid like whatever nominal thing, like we split it 8 ways, so it's like $25 here and there. But sometimes Jalen will come do a talk with me and I will split my fee with him. And so I guess it's like the level of participation for sure. With the question around like maybe the person that I meet and we're together for 5 minutes, that's a good question. I'm not sure. But they're getting a free photo shoot. So there's that. But yeah. No, I don't know. It's a really good point.
Like with journalism, right? I mean,
Yeah.
their big thing is like we don't pay our subjects because we're supposed to get something actual.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're making a profit off of the interview with me or taking my
Yeah.
pictures.
Yeah. I know. Photography and ethics, it's complicated. I don't, any other questions?
I love
Okay,
your
yeah.
willingness to take the long lens and then to go closer, because it is not as scary taking portraits with a 200mm lens versus going close and connecting and dealing with your own insecurities and being right there with them. It's just courageous, and I applaud that. That's not easy.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I have to give Marylanders credit because I was so much more scared because of their I've had such a warm welcome, and it's really made me feel a lot more relaxed asking people, because everyone here's really been quite friendly and open to having their photograph taken. So that definitely helps. A lot less being cursed at here.
Your
Yeah.
list, I was really intrigued by your list of finding the alternate words that also help make those bridges.
Yeah.
Is that on a website that you have, or is that available?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I work in facilitation where we're trying to make connection all the time, and how powerful words are. I thought that generation of alternative ways to connect and not use such triggering terms was fantastic.
Yeah, I should put this on my website, but I do think if you look up decolonizing photographic land, there's many articles written about it as well too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. So should we get some awards out? Yeah. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna have Corey hand out the exciting news.
Thank you, Saskia. How y'all hanging in there? All right, we're gonna be quick. Okay, we're able to give out 4 awards for this exhibition. There's an honorable mention, first, second, and third. And so I'm gonna announce those, starting with honorable mention. If I call your name, if you would raise your hand and then find me afterwards so that I can go over some logistics. And we'd also probably love to get your picture taken with your work. So, without further ado, honorable mention. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Technology. How's this possible? Sorry. Uno momento. Oh, yeah. Okay. Honorable mention goes to Gabe Kolodner's Insomniac. Is Gabe here? Gabe? I think Gabe is from Massachusetts, so not too likely. Congrats, Gabe, wherever you are. Third place goes to Prescott Lastman's Smooch Attack. Is Prescott here? Prescott, congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, come see me afterwards. Second place goes to Sam Levin's Fuel Tanker Explosion. Sam. Congratulations, Sam. And then first place goes to Andriana Nativio's Beside the Lake.